the 5th at 7:09 at Council Chambers, 400 Center Road. We have quorum. The agenda is before everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and adoption of the agenda is the second item. I'll ask for a motion. I'll take that as a yes. And a second, hands, that's good, thank you. I have some changes, if you could make note on your agenda packages. We'll be doing a little bit of shuffling here. The public participation, which is item number 3, we will be moving to as item 8A3, which will precede the formerly item number 3, which is the CAO cell tower license agreement process. And then followed by that, we will have the delegation, which will be Darren and Tanya. So that will be clustering all those items in the 8.3 to 5. The other item that we have is on item 8A6. The CAO has asked me to add, the topic is trees at Lions Bay Beach Park and Wade Park. Actually, we'll precede, sorry, I apologize. We'll precede that with public participation. I'm splitting the closing public participation into A and B. So the A part will be the post cell tower, and then the B part will be at the end of your package before we go in camera. And then the item after that will be item 8A6, 5, 6, 7, which will be the trees, Lions Bay Beach Park and Wade Memorial Park. Another extra item is I have a small report on dealing with the MP and the MLA with respect to TransLink. And the final item is item 14 for the closed agenda. If we could add item E, which is 35 Kelvin Grove Way. Would anybody like me to repeat that so they can keep the records current? That being no, we'll go along with that as it is. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda as amended? One to count, thank you. Carried, good, done. So we're going to pass on the, sorry, we're not going to pass. We're going to go next up to the public delegation request, which will be the delegation of Bill Cox, partner BDO Canada, and it will be on the presentation of the Village 2019 final audit. And Bill, you are away and welcome.
Sorry, Ron, if I can just interject for one moment. I didn't catch whether or not you added the on-table correspondence as 11B that was circulated earlier.
I hate to look confused as I'm looking at Carla. On table 11.
11B, yeah.
11B, we will add that. So Carla, can you make note of that?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we have Mr. Paul Fripp standing in for Mr. Bill Cox. Hello, Paul.
I thought I saw Bill standing. Okay, it's a twofer. Okay.
Two for the price of one.
We like that.
Bill, sorry, didn't see you there, Bill.
We like that in Lions Bay. All right, gentlemen, you are away, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So Peter stole our thunder there. I was going to say I'm going to flip through the financial statements briefly, and Paul's going to speak to our audit letter. Are we doing both of those at the same time at this point on the agenda, Mr. Mayor? Both our letter and the financial statements?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to flip through the financial statements first. Pam, your CFO, is in the room with you, Mr. Mayor, I guess?
Yes, she is.
And she has, I think she hates it when I say this, but she has every single number and transaction memorized. So if there's any questions you have on details, she has it all memorized. But I thought I would go over a couple of the highlights from the statements on her behalf first. So I don't have the agenda package numbering, but I believe you have a copy of the draft statements in the package.
Let's just refer to them as the draft statements, Bill.
Okay. Do I need to refer to? No, I guess everybody can find them. So one of the things that will happen at this meeting, hopefully, is that council will approve the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2019. Seems like a long time ago now. Lots has happened in the world since. Our audit is not 100% complete until council approves the financial statements and we do our final little bit of wrap-up work, but we are substantially complete at this point. It will be a clean audit opinion. Let's just say the audit process did not go exactly as we had drawn it up on paper, not because of any fault of staff or systems or anything like that. There was just a little virus that popped up in between. So a lot more work done remotely, and really a credit to your staff and your team for being able to keep on the timeline. So, sorry, that's a little bit too much preamble. So back to the statements. I just circled a couple of things on a few of the main pages of the financial statements to speak to. I'm on the statement of financial position now, which is page 5 of the draft financial statement package. And this is a list of your assets, liabilities, and fund balances at the end of the fiscal year. A couple things that I circled to speak to. The number one thing, the thing that I always circle first and always speak to first when I'm at any local government is the very bottom of the bottom of all the numbers on the page. There's a line called accumulated surplus, and that amount is almost $25 million. The one thing that I always like to make sure I get across, and I'm probably repeating myself more than I should, but the very key point is that even though we use the word surplus, that's what the accounting standards ask us to use. It's not surplus money that's available to be spent. You do not have $25 million in the bank to spend. It'd be nice if you did, but you don't. Most of that, the vast majority of that, and there's a reference to note 11 there. Maybe I'll just flip there quickly, because note 11 does give a good summary of what's there. So the vast majority of that, over $20 million of that, is something called invested in capital assets. So that money's already been spent. It's been invested in infrastructure, roads, water, computers, desks, any hard asset is the infrastructure, and those are called tangible capital assets. The reason why it's stuck in this word that us accountants use as surplus is because they haven't been expensed yet for accounting purposes. Even though the cash is gone, for accounting purposes, we write them off over their useful life, which for some of those assets is decades. So it's important that you have that infrastructure, and it's fantastic that you have spent that up to develop that infrastructure. You're spending more on infrastructure now. You've got some big projects underway, so that's all good. But it means it's spent. It's not cash that you have available. Also in note 11, you see reserve funds. So these are reserve funds. These are statutory funds. There's strings on those. They're also important reserves that you have for spending, but there's some strings on it. So it's only the unrestricted amounts, which totaled $2.3 million at the end of the fiscal year. Those are the really free and clear monies that you have, and that number can never be zero, because you need a certain amount of working capital to keep things going, to deal with the timing of cash inflows and outflows during the year. So you're in a good financial position there, but not $25 million worth of cash. Always like to make sure I mention that. So I'm back on page 5 in the statement of financial position. Just a couple other things I circled. The cash and equivalents amount at the top of the page. So this is that cash that you actually do have around, $3.7 million. So that's a good position to be in for a local government the size of Lions Bay. The grants receivable amount a little higher than usual because of the project that's underway. And the other item that you don't typically see in the financial assets is asset held for sale. there was the 2 properties authorized for sale by council. One had sold before the end of the year, the other hadn't, so the other is still sitting there in financial assets. On the liability side, accounts payable higher than last year because of the big capital project in process. The second line there, I thought I would speak to sick overtime, wellness, and vacation payable. That number's actually down a fair bit from last year, and I think it's a good news story. The accounting standards require that you take a long forward look at all benefits that employees have earned during their time. And to do that, you really need to make actuarial assumptions. And this year, the village hired an actuary to take a real scientific approach to looking at that. And the finding was actually a lower liability than had been anticipated. So that's really good news story in a case of managing those benefits well. That was all the comment I had on the statement of financial position. Pam, is there anything else you wanted to speak to on that page?
You tell them I can't talk.
Want to switch? Let me switch, Pam.
You put your back out too.
I sit in chairs.
Sorry, Bill, my computer has too much feedback, so I'm now sitting in the mayor's seat. No, there wasn't. I think you touched on all the things I wanted to touch on, the actuarial adjustment, and really I think everything else. The long-term debt, we did have an increase of $380,000 for the public works trucks, but then that's offset by the continued payments we made during the year. And I think that's all I had highlighted as well.
Okay, I'm going to, if there's no questions, I'm going to flip to the next page, which is the statement of operations. So while the first page was ending balances, statement of operations is the revenues and expenses for the year. So it's on the same basis as your annual financial plan, your budget is, and that's why this page has 3 columns. The first column is what was budgeted in the financial plan. The middle column is the actual results for 2019, and the far right column is the what happened, the actual results in 2018. Again, I'm going to start with the surplus. In this case, something called the annual surplus, which is the 3rd line from the bottom on that page. It's budgeted at $4 million, and the actual is $3.8 million, so very close to budget. I did want to highlight again that certainly everybody on council will recall passing a balanced budget, and the reason why we show $4 million here is there's some revenues and expenses in your budget. Your budget is done more on a cash flow basis, and some of those items, such as transfers to reserves and capital expenditure, those things are not expenses for accounting purposes. So even though the budget balances from a cash flow point of view, from an accounting point of view, you are budgeting for a surplus. And it really is going to be the case that almost every year, any local government is going to be budgeting for a surplus. And the reason for that is because of capital. We, for accounting purposes, we don't expense the capital when you expend it, as I said earlier. It is expensed over its useful life. And that is based at the cost that we pay for those things. Whereas the capital that you spend in a year, of course, is in current dollars. So we're writing off assets, some of which were bought in the 1970s with inflation a lot lower cost, but we're having to replenish them at a higher cost. So because of that in and out, there's almost always going to be a surplus showing. So I'd like to point that out because the village doesn't want to tax more than it has to. It's not a good use of funds if it overtaxes and is flowing through with money. So it's not like this surplus every year is just going to build and build and build. It's actually used for capital. So it looks a little funny on the page if you're not an accountant, you're not used to seeing these things, but that is a pretty normal course of business to have that sort of surplus. In terms of some of the revenues and expenses during the year, I circled a couple of things. Government transfers in the revenue section, and the top was a little bit less a lot more than last year, but a little bit less than budget. And again, that's because of the timing of the capital project. And the also the revenue, the gain on sale of asset held for sale, less than budget because the other, as we saw in the balance sheet, the other property is still held and wasn't sold as of the end of the year. Other than that, those two, though, the revenues are pretty much in line. On the expense side, a little bit less than budget in all cases, pretty good all the way around. And as I said at the start, overall, $3.8 million surplus is close to the budget of $4 million. So I'll ask Pam again, even though it says Ron McLaughlin on my screen. Anything else to add that we should mention?
No, again, I think you've touched on them. Just as you pointed out, we were running favorable to budget, and that was indicated when we did our 2020 budget. There was, we had about $230,000 worth of items that we rebudgeted in operating. So that really accounts for most of the difference between the budget and the actual for the expenses.
Good point. Other pages I'm going to flip through faster because they're more accounting type things. But I did want to, page 7, statement of changes in net financial assets. I did want to point this out because this may, if I didn't confuse you already, talking about capital and the acquisition in current dollars versus writing off in old 1970s dollars. This page here sort of highlights that. You can see in the first column, the financial plan was calling for capital expenditure of $3.1 million. Now it is higher than a typical year because of the water project. The $3.1 million and amortization was budgeted at $736,000. So you can see that kind of differential that happens, and that's why the budget revenues almost always are in a surplus position. Better not belabor that point too much. I'm going to go through to the accounting policies and notes, which start on page 9. Most of these are very similar wording to last year. There's a lot of this wording is sort of required wording by accounting standards. Not much has changed here. A couple of notes to point out. Note 1 provides some more detail on the asset held for sale, the parcel of land that was still there at the end of the year, and also refers to the sale that had occurred previously. Note 5, page 13, long-term debt, outlines all the debt that has been issued to date. Note 7 is one of those notes that you should always look at if you're looking at any financial statement, contingent liabilities and contractual obligations. You'll find this type of note in any financial statement, and this is where you find some of the things that aren't necessarily recorded in the financial statements that could be an issue sometime in the future. There's nothing here that causes concern. The first 1, 2, 3, 4 items in this note are standard things for BC local governments. Most of them borrow with the MFA, most of them are insured through the Municipal Insurance Association. Some of those things are joint and several liability, so there is a responsibility there as a member of those programs, but nothing unusual or untoward. The last 5, point 5 there refers to litigation matter, and old litigation in regard to employment matter, which I think is pretty well low likelihood, I believe, of anything occurring with that at this point. Still potential, but not likely. Note 8, contractual rights, is another note that is good information that just shows what future, so again, these aren't booked yet until they happen, but it shows what future revenues will be flowing to the village for agreements that it's entered into, in this case, lease contract. And I think maybe the last thing I'll point to is note 14. I think that's on page 21, subsequent events. So this just speaks to COVID and the the accounting regulators have said, this pandemic thing is, I mean, how many times on the news do we hear the new normal and all those sort of terminology? So from a business operations point of view, the accounting standards folks have said, you really cannot issue a financial statement at this time in the world without mentioning COVID. Now, there could be some organizations, such as healthcare organizations, that are really directly impacted and may have a lot of disclosure or maybe risks of failure. Fortunately, that doesn't seem to have happened in Canada. For local governments, though, obviously there's going to be an impact. We don't know what that is, but nothing super untoward has happened as of yet, and of course things are starting to improve and perhaps opening up soon. So perhaps we will be turning the corner on this, but the financial statements do need to make some reference to it. And the note that management put here in note 14, I think, is a very adequate disclosure of that. So that was all the highlights that I spoke to. Again, not sure if your CFO wants to add anything else or point out anything else.
No, I don't think so at this time.
And would it be appropriate, Mr. Mayor, for questions at this point, or do you want us to jump ahead to our audit letter?
Pam, why don't you represent me here and ask if there's any questions?
Does anyone have any questions about the financial statements?
Is it true, Pam, that you have every number memorized?
It is not, Mr. Cox.
Pam, I just have a quick one. I can't remember on the schedule combined statements, the actual versus plan columns. The big delta on the plan for interest was 3.8 and it went down to 3.1. What was that? Why was that actual so different to the plan?
Sorry, where are you looking?
Okay, so let's do pages. Page 22.
Oh, the segmented note.
Right, then you go down, if you go down to the bottom section of that page, you've got that number of 3.8 million versus 3.1 million, which summarizes the lines above. And I'm just trying to work out what was the big difference in our plan versus our actual there of almost $600,000.
Okay, so you're looking at the income statement. So the difference between actual 28 budget and actual, or 2018 actual and 2019?
No, 2019 actual versus financial plan.
Okay. So
Oh, wait, yeah, I see, it's right on the,
yes, the 4 million versus the 3.8. Oh, you're looking at the expenses, the 3.8 to the 3.2?
Yes.
Yes.
Was there one big driver on that? I couldn't quite.
It was various things. One of the big one was these expenses include amortization, and the budget was really high on amortization. I had assumed that assets would be completed earlier than they were, so I took a full year's depreciation, especially on the water tank. So that accounted for about $150,000 of it. We also were just lower on expenses, I had mentioned. So we had about $230,000 that we rebudgeted in 2020. So the bulk of it was probably amortization and the rebudgets. And yeah, I got that sort of totaled up, because it was about $200,000 on the amortization, and then with the $234,000 of expenses, it was contract services, legal fees. We were favorable in salaries because we had a vacant position for half the year, and that were all things that weren't taken into an account in the budget.
Okay, it's all coming back to me now. Okay. You did tell us all that before. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
That's the only question I had.
Any other questions?
There being none. Bill wants to go next one.
So if there's no other questions, should we move on? I guess Paul was going to present the actual audit report.
yes, go ahead, Paul.
Great, thanks very much. Thank you for having me this evening. As Bill mentioned, we are substantially complete and are preparing to issue an unqualified audit opinion pending just a few wrap-up items. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to highlight some of our key audit areas as well as our findings in those areas. When we conduct our audit, we do take a risk-based audit approach, which involves looking at areas that have a higher likelihood of difference or error arising by virtue of complexity in standards or high degree of estimation that is being applied in those sections. And so the areas that we focused on during our audit, which are substantially unchanged from what was communicated in our planning letter to council earlier in the year, or maybe it was late last year, is as follows. So management override of internal controls. And I want to just sort of preface this one by saying that this is a required risk under Canadian auditing standards. It doesn't mean that we believe that management would perpetrate an overriding internal controls. Just it acknowledges that by virtue of their position, they could override internal controls. And so to discharge this area, we review manual transactions in the general ledger around key reporting dates and look for unusual non-recurring adjustments or also bias in estimates that are made in the financial statements. Our audit testing in this area was executed as planned without any issues to report to council today. Next area is grant and revenue recognition. So this is a complex area under Canadian public sector accounting standards, particularly around government transfers. And it requires to review the grant contracts for any sort of stipulations or requirements that need to be met before the revenue is recognized in the financial statements. And so we will review grant agreements, we'll review receipt of funding, and based on that, compare it to the revenue that was recognized. And in this area, we did have an adjustment that was recorded related to the funding of the water storage facility, which we'll take a look at a little bit later in the letter. Bill mentioned the assets held for sale as he was going through the financial statements. So we reviewed the sale that occurred in the year. We recalculated the gain on the sale of the parcel of land as well. We reviewed the asset that is still to be sold to ensure it meets the criteria for classification as an asset to be held for sale. And there was no exceptions or issues to raise with council today. Salaries and benefits. This area is not necessarily complex, but just because of the magnitude within the financial statements, it's an important area for local governments. And so we will test the internal controls to make sure that the opportunity for error is small, as well as perform various analytics, particularly around against benefits, against prior year, against budget, to make sure that there any sort of changes in those areas are well supported, and there's nothing that we've raised to council's attention today. Next area is employee future benefits, and so Bill spent quite a bit of time talking about the valuation that occurs. Our audit testing in this area is to look at that test, look at the report that's provided by the actuary and assess the inputs. So that's the data that's transmitted to the actuary, as well as any of the discount rates or inflation rates that are built into those models to make sure that they are in line with what we're seeing across local governments. There was an unadjusted difference in this area. It pertains to prior year. It's really a reversing error, and we'll discuss that a little bit later in this letter. And last but not least, a note disclosure pertaining to COVID-19. Now, this was not in the planning report that was issued earlier this year. It's because COVID-19 hadn't been declared a global pandemic at that time. So we did, review the assets and liabilities of the village to ensure that there was no obvious impacts arising from COVID-19. We discussed with management their assessment of the impact of COVID-19, and we agreed with management that because of the complexity of the situation, that the ultimate outcome was not determinable at this point in time. Moving along to Appendix B of our letter, page 15, adjusted and unadjusted differences. So the unadjusted differences, so these are differences that arise out of our audit testing that are not adjusted for in the financial statements. The first one is, I guess, a sort of standard recurring entry. It relates to recording of accrued interest on debt at year end. You can see that there's a similar 2018 impact, and so the impact on the annual surplus is virtually nil. We agreed with management that this adjustment was not material to make in the financial statements. The next is the reversing area that I mentioned around employee future benefits. So during last year's audit, we did raise an unadjusted audit difference related to employee future benefits. And that has since been corrected because of the actuarial evaluation that was performed. And so this acknowledges that this difference that we acknowledged in 2018 has effectively reversed out of the financial statements. On the next page, page 16, the summary of adjusted differences. During our testing of the grant funding around the water storage facilities replacement, we identified that the village had incurred sufficient costs within the fiscal year to facilitate claiming an additional amount of revenue than was recognized in the financial statements. And so we proposed an adjustment which was recorded as an increase to revenue and an increase to grants receivable. All right, so that's predominantly high-level overview of the results of our audit. Pam, should I go through the management letter at this time?
Yes, yeah, you could probably quickly go through that. I don't think there's a lot of points.
No, so our management letter is where we take the opportunity to raise things of interest to council or that arise out of our audit testing. This year, we didn't have any observations related to our audit testing that we wanted to raise with council today. I think that is it speaks to the strength of Pam and her team in the office there, of how well they were able to prepare the financial statements for us this year, especially considering the circumstances under which the audit was conducted. The point that we've raised is around a new public sector accounting standard that is effective for years ending 2022, and that's PS 3280 Asset Retirement Obligation. And we want to raise this just because of the volume of work that we expect that this will take for local governments to properly prepare and implement this standard. It involves reviewing all infrastructure currently in place for any legal or contractual obligations that may exist at the end of an asset's useful life. And so just that volume of going through the infrastructure that's in place and assessing them, we believe, is quite a significant volume of work for the finance department. And so we raise that more for awareness than anything else. Now, having said that though, and maybe Bill can chime in on this, there is a possibility that this standard will be delayed by virtue of COVID-19.
Yeah, I'll just mention that quickly. I happen to be on the Public Sector Accounting Board, which is the board that sets the accounting standards, and as we mentioned in our letter in June, at the June meeting, the board's going to vote on deferring that, because this is a very labor-intensive accounting standard. And it's only a guess, but my guess is probably 95% likely that we'll get a 1-year delay on that. So when it says 2022, it's probably going to be 2023, but there's a lot of work to do, so I wouldn't put it off any later than necessary.
All right, that takes care of our high-level overview of our audit results. So I think we'll take questions if there are any in relation to this report.
Yes, no questions?
I have one, I'll take your spot. Thank you, gentlemen, and this is for the both of you. Firstly, it's hard to believe because Bill Cox and I have known each other for so long that we actually originated this hairstyle. And it's now become quite popular, well, for a variety of reasons. But
Everybody's been complaining about all the barbershops being closed. I'm like, doesn't matter to me.
you know, it's another cost center. We're a small community, and I feel lucky that we are, given the pandemic that's underway. And your firm is the prominent accounting house for the majority of municipalities in Western Canada. My perception is that we're in pretty good shape because we're a small, closely knit community. We don't have massive revenue sources off commercial. We don't have a gambling institution where we're getting revenue off that. I mean, we're basically just a nice, quiet residential community, which, you know, when I argue with Metro whether we're urban or rural, depending on where the grants are, that's where I'm going to go. But so my question is, gentlemen, is that, you know, the pandemic has created havoc with most large municipalities. My sense is that the smaller ones who actually have a vision and were doing the right things all along are actually doing okay. So I guess my question in terms of your guidance is that we think that our path of disposing of superfluous assets, our taxation going towards infrastructure fund, keeping our expenses more or less in line with constant personnel, and positioning ourselves for potential for development, but it's a little uncertain just yet. So my thinking is that we're doing about as well as we can in the current environment and the size of our village. So I'm looking for any silver bullet of advice that you can give us where we can make any changes that would be an improvement, or something that other municipalities have done within your vast group of clients.
Well, a lot of comment there. I think I would agree with most of that for sure. I think what we've found, and you touched on this, is there have been a lot of local governments that have been perhaps thinking that they were very progressive in terms of some of the things they're doing, and sometimes, you know, at times like this, it comes back to haunt you a little bit. There's nothing wrong with sticking to the nuts and bolts of what a local government should do. We were hearing, Paul and I were at a meeting last night where we were hearing about you mentioned the City of Vancouver, and the City of Vancouver relies a lot on, believe it or not, parking revenues is a huge impact for them. So things like parking revenues, development revenues, those things dry up at these sort of times, whereas, you know, when you're sticking to your knitting here, and you're a small, close-knit community, I agree with what you say. It's a little easier to pull in and make things happen. But still a struggle. I know it hasn't been easy.
Thank you very much. To my councillors or the staff, any questions? Any other one? With that, we'll say thank you, and the recommendation is that the report, Village of Lions Bay 2019 Final Audit Report, be received for information purposes. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. No nays. Thank you. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and we'll let you go back to, oh, not the hockey game.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having us,
Paul.
yeah.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
Joe. Bye-bye. So the next piece up, and this goes to where we were going to do some changes. Oh, no, not. So it's, the next one is following through, is review and approval of minutes of the prior meeting. And that would be the regular council meeting of April 21st, 2020. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes, and then we'll go to the amendments. Thank you. And any changes, additions, deletions? I have none. Any from the councillors? I love silence. I'm going to take that as there being none, and that the minutes of April 21st, 2020 are accepted as presented. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Good. Next item, business arising from the minutes. Does anybody have any business arising from the minutes?
Yep, I do.
Thank you, Councillor.
On page 57, we were talking about the new process for the building permit applications. It wasn't minutes in, but we did discuss options around electronic building permit submissions, and the CEO was going to take that away as an action. It didn't get minuted, but could we have it added to the unfinished business table?
Yep, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Abbott?
No, that's all.
Thank you very much. Please make the amendment. All right, no other business arising. It's your time, hands up. There being none, nope. Unfinished business, which are the three items there, which is, the first one is mine, which is the ongoing discussion on the Sea to Sky Highway. The next one, which is item number 125, I have responded to former Mayor Broughton. And for the last item, which is the Howe Sound Community Forum, for those councillors, I know Councillor Bain and Cunliffe went. Perhaps Councillor Barmeyer, if you could give us an update on that. Okay, well, let's say we'll be moving that up.
Sorry, was that for Norm or what?
I think you went to the meeting, yes?
I did, yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you said Councillor Barmeyer.
No, I'm not sure. I think he wanted to go but couldn't go.
Right.
So,
Yeah, just briefly, I should mention that it was a more low-key meeting without too many reports coming in, and there's sort of a round table without a table of everybody checking in for their community of what's being done. I mentioned our infrastructure planning and repair and stuff that's going on, and also mentioned Norm's electric vehicle project recharging station. And I noticed the MP kind of picked up on that and seemed a little bit more enthusiastic than I expected, but nothing to say you shouldn't be enthusiastic. Yeah, it was a good low-key meeting. It was kind of good to get together again and hear from everybody around the zone.
good, thank you very much. Any questions for Councillor Bain? There being none, thank you very much for attending on our behalf, Councillor Bain. And so, Carla, that'll be a strike for number 125 and 126. Thank you. Next item is the staff report, and that is the motion, and that's approval of the 2019 financial statements, which we talked about with the gentleman. And I'll read the motion that the Village of Lions Bay 2019 audited financial statements as presented to Council on May 5th, 2020 be approved pursuant to the Community Charter Section 167(1), and that the 29 audited financial statements be included in the 2019 annual report pursuant to the committee charter, section 98. I will put forward that as a motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Barmeyer, any discussion on this? No, I'll call the motion. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous ayes. Thank you very much. Which brings us up to item 8A2, which is the CAO de Jones Parking and Bylaw Enforcement Report. Can I have your verbal update, please?
Thank you. And not too much to report. We remain on lockdown in terms of our parks and parking lots. Parking areas are restricted to, for the most part, permit parking only, and we're addressing parking issues as they arise and dealing with them as one-offs. I would like to report we have 2 new bylaw enforcement officers, and council, as you may recall, provided the resolutions to appoint them at the last meeting. They've now had an opportunity to put some time in. So we have Chris and Jennifer, our new bylaw enforcement officers. And Jennifer lives in the village, Chris not too far away. And I regret to inform council we have also a resignation of one of our bylaw enforcement officers, and that is Sarb Johal. For other reasons, he's got a full-time job with the Canadian Border Services and a lot of other things going on in his life, and so he felt it best to step back and allow the 2 new officers to take over in terms of the hours that we have available, which are always somewhat limited. So we're happy to have the newbies on board, and you may see them around town, and please give them a friendly wave if you do, from a distance, of course. And that's about all I've got at this point, unless there's any questions from council with respect to this particular subject matter.
Thank you very much, CEO. I'll start. Can you tell me what the normal rotation is? It's supposed to be sunny and warm this weekend. What would it look like in terms of enforcement?
We'll have staff on for Friday afternoon, evening, and on Saturday and on Sunday.
Thank you very much.
And of course, the following weekend is the main long weekend, so we'll be staffed up for that as well.
And are we coordinating with the CN police and I think you can respond on the RCMP, or are they in play, or are they just kind of call as you need?
We've been in touch with RCMP a few times over the last few weeks, just coordinating a variety of different matters, and you, Mr. Mayor, have taken a lead on getting us into a better relationship with the CN police and enhancing our abilities in that respect. I haven't had an opportunity to meet with or speak with the officers that you've introduced to Lions Bay, but I hope to do so soon, and certainly before the May long weekend.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any other questions?
Yeah, I've just got one. So now that we have a Jennifer, who's a local, and I'm not sure of her availability or what other work she does, but is there an opportunity for her to do bylaw enforcement outside of the regular rotation, or will that continue to be a works yard function if it's needed?
We only have a certain amount of hours allocated within the budget for bylaw enforcement. We'd have to play around with the resources are dedicated to a weekend versus a weekday, but there may be opportunities when, based on the weather, if it's going to be a lousy weekend and it's nice during the week, we may have an opportunity to provide some bylaw enforcement during the days, on nice days. And that will depend upon Jennifer's availability. She does have other work as well, but seems amenable to working with us on coming up with mutually satisfactory timetables and schedules, and is happy to get the hours in. So.
The reason I ask is because today was a nice sunny day, the first one in a while. There was a few cars parked without stickers on the normal spots up in this part of the world. Wasn't excessive, but sorry, a couple of clear days, and we could slip back into that outside of the weekend as well.
Yeah, for minor issues during the week, we also have the availability of our public works officers who can ticket people when they are in the neighborhood and see infractions. So it's another avenue for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions then? And just one quick second, if everybody complies while I consult with my colleague. There's 8 people and 5 spots for 2 minutes apiece.
So you'll have to make the motion to extend, to allow for extension of that.
Don't want you.
But he might not and she might not.
Okay. Thank you, excuse me. All right, so that's, so we've received the CAO's verbal report, thank you. So the next item is, I'll just generally reference this as the cell tower discussion. So per the changes that I had, the first piece up will be the public participation, and that is for 10 minutes and 2 minutes apiece. That would allow for 5 people. I see that I have 8 people here, and I'm not sure whether everybody wishes to speak or not. I'm giving preference to the 3 individuals who are here in chambers.
Who are the additional people? Can you just read out who the additional people are online who have requested to speak?
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people online. I don't know whether they all want to speak or not.
Okay.
So I'll do a quick roll call though. So,
Mr. Chair,
yep,
may I suggest that in the circumstances, council consider relaxing the 10-minute rule, and so that each of the people who wish to speak tonight have the opportunity to have their 2 minutes to address their concerns or whatever they would like to say or ask.
all right. I'll take that as, I'll put forward that motion if council could confirm that. Can I have ayes and nays opposed?
Aye.
Any nays? No. All right, well, I'll read through the list, and it's just an arbitrary the way it came on stream. So first up will be Tamara, followed by Charlie, then Michael, then Ruth, then Brenda, then Golly, if I have the name right, and then Vincent and potentially Susan. And if you choose not to speak, that's fine. And so Carla, if you can get the timer, and we're going to ask you to stick to the 2 minutes, and you'll hear it. So if you are speaking, please conclude quickly when you hear the bell. And
So do we just speak from where we are, or?
you should come. I'm not sure. Why don't you? I'll move.
Okay.
And
Or you can just flip the computer
I'm not sure how
around.
close the sound is, Tamara. So
Okay, no, fair enough.
Yeah, we can.
come
I've
closer.
got sand sanitizer.
Just come closer. There you go.
Thanks.
Here, sit in my chair, Tamara.
Be there for a minute.
I'm here for a minute. Yeah. Okay, we do get charged now. There we go. All right, Carla, let's go. Tamara, you're up.
So Mayor and Council, thank you so much for accommodating my request to speak tonight. I've lived in Lions Bay since 1999, and I moved here from Montreal to raise my young family. We moved here, we picked Lions Bay because it was surrounded specifically by 3 sites of green space and its natural national park look and feel. It's a safe, close-knit community vibe. And Lions Bay is not Bowen, it's not West Vancouver, it's not North Vancouver, Kitsilano, or the West End. And it's a backbone, got a strong backbone of volunteerism, interwoven with an extremely strong community spirit vibe. And that's why we chose it. It has a handful of stop signs, no traffic lights, and the only amenity is really the village hall and the community store. We are a wonderful, thoughtful community. Since we have lived here, I think we've participated in 3 OCP official community plan processes, and all of them have encouraged reflection, discussion, and debate, discouraged corporate development, densification, and were centered around the safety and security and tranquility for both people and nature. The motion in regards to the communication tower, because it's not necessarily specifically designated as cellular tower, I think violates the OCP as well as 2 municipal bylaws, bylaw number 408, which was passed in 2008, and number 520, which is from 2017. Both of which are centered in specific ways around watershed rights and natural habitats. 25 years ago, we used to smoke in airplanes. That was the norm, and we do not know how the communications tower will be used, and we cannot be guaranteed who will rent the space once it is up. Once it is up, it will be near impossible to remove. Signing this motion places the village of Lions Bay at potential risk for severe financial penalties down the road, and at a minimum gives us a 10-year risk-reward evaluation for minimal rental return from SBA. The financial, health, and environmental risks are too high to not fully engage with the entire community, especially if you're going to ignore the OCP that was done with great community consultation process. My sincere concern is that for financial contractual reasons, the terms are minimum 10 years as outlined in the May 7th agenda. This is an irrevocable decision and one that truly deserves a thoughtful due process, including revising our OCP and land use bylaws, and should certainly not be pushed through when citizens are not allowed to participate fully on all levels of this extremely broad discussion. I greatly encourage you to accepting staff recommendations is a yes vote for a request for a decision to proceed, a contract with SBA. So I greatly encourage you to vote no on this specific issue on the cell tower or communications tower motion in front of you. Thank you so much, and have a happy Mother's Day weekend.
Thank you very much, Brown. Charlie, you're next up. And let's just have a seat in the chair. I'm just not sure where the audio carries through.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for including me on this. I did try and dial in, but I was having problems with the number. Anyway, I have in my hand a petition. It is the Lions Bay residents opposed to the Harvey Creek Tower Development petition. It is as of the 4th of May 2020. 111 residents, or approximately 20% of the residencies, believe that the risk to Lions Bay's residents' well-being, its biodiversity, vistas, property values and reputation, with no guarantee of a significant cell service improvement, are just too considerable for this project to proceed. I'm just going to briefly recap the salient points. It should be pretty quick. The project was initiated without any input to ascertain public opinion. The project was initiated without any research to ascertain the extent of any cell service deficiencies. The project was broadcast to the village as a fix, with cell phone improvements coming to Lions Bay, which is erroneous given there was no guarantee of cell improvement due to the lack of research into tower best placement. Only those whose carriers choose to lease space on the tower may see any improvement, and the tower real estate could go to a non-cell phone provider, as the real estate is allocated on the system on a first come, first served basis. The general risks associated with 5G and its use of millimetre waves, and the EMF safety concerns, especially with the vulnerable immune-compromised residents. There are topographical hazard risks and the permanent transformation of the village panorama. SBA seemed to be unable to provide in advance of village approval a visual representation of the new village panorama that shows a confirmed exact tower placement and scale depicting all technical equipment necessary to make it functional, i.e. with or without the imposing microwave dishes. On completion, if the tower does not visually match the visual representation thus supplied, the village will be unable to remedy. The lands above the village are zoned OS1 with only limited infrastructure, not private interest permitted per the bylaw, so does council maintain that this tower falls into good stewardship? It has a mere $20,000 a year revenue, which is half that source from parking, and if a revenue is claimed, it's therefore a third-party business which is not permitted in OS1 zone lands. The negative effect on property values is also a concern. Lions Bay Alert uses text messaging. I've only got one more paragraph. Lions Bay Alert uses text messaging to deliver announcements. We don't need an additional tower to achieve better service for this. In the 2011 Japanese tsunami, every single text message sent was eventually delivered. And this was a source from North Shore Emergency Management when I attended a class there. Existing text messaging function is by its very nature incredibly dependable. Given the remarkable community opposition to this tower in the form of petition signatories and correspondence, Council should seriously consider whether they are truly representing and supporting the community's wishes if they choose to allow this project to proceed. There's the lovely petition. Anyway, I'm going to leave that here for
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, guys.
Charlie,
That was Leo.
Charlie, go say how many signatures.
There's 111. I said it at the very beginning.
Happy birthday.
Good night.
Thank you. I locked it.
Mr. Pryor?
Good
Good luck, you. Michael? Yes, no?
Okay, no, I'm fine.
No? Next one is Ruth.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
I'm just going to do with my video off. I'm speaking with concerns about the report, the CAO request for decision. I see the evidence that SBA has done extensive follow the process. There's reams of paper here to support that. I'm not satisfied that the depth and the quality of the responses have really addressed, and I'm just going to pick on two key areas for me. And one is, I don't believe that the amendment to the agreement is, which is 6.3, is strong enough. It requires that there be 3 positions held on the communications tower for cellular communication providers. But this, I believe that this whole agreement should be on the guarantee that 3 cell phone providers commit to leasing space and for the purpose of improving cell phone coverage, which was what I understood was the way that this was being sold to the villagers. I understand it has benefits to the village for other communication purposes, which are of value. However, the whole point is to, it's being promoted as improving self-service coverage. The report in section, in C, lack of any assurances that there will be improved cellular coverage. Preliminary propagation analysis. This is, I had to look that word up, and it's based purely on widely spread information by SBA, meaning that, oh yeah, there's interest from cellular companies, but there is no evidence that actually placing or leasing space in Lions Bay is part of those communication companies' business plan, that they will in fact lease the space. And I believe that, again, this tower is not, I couldn't find where it actually confirms the height of the tower. That may be in there, but the third point is on the environmental impacts, which have really pretty much been dismissed. The point is not about the footprint of the cellular tower, it is about the height and the impacts that, or there should be at least some cursory consideration for the impacts on wildlife and birds. It is about the height of the tower, it's extremely high. So those are my three. I'm not satisfied at all with the responses to my concerns. And I could go on, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And Brenda has gone from virtual to real, and she'll be joining us real.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ron, Mayor McLaughlin, and Council for this opportunity to speak this evening. I'll predominantly be reading from my notes because I want to ensure that I have covered the basis. As a former 5-term mayor, a former council member, former 3-term PAC chair at the Lions Bay School, 18-year ownership of the Lions Bay Store and Cafe, and visionary and charter chair of House Sound Community Table, and resident for 46 years. I'm knowledgeable about Lions Bay, and I'm also knowledgeable about its official community plan. I want to inform Council that until a vote occurs, it is never too far along to vote no. I also want to remind Council that an abstained vote is a yes vote. So please do not abstain, but vote no. I'm here this evening to request that Council vote no to placing a cell tower in our watershed. A cell tower is contrary to our official community plan on land that is designated green space parkland for good reason. The reasons include both community safety as well as a protection of our natural environment that is so valued in our OCP. Council must vote no to the cell tower and to the OCP changes identified under number 8 reports, item A3, 1 to 5, referencing page 65. The safety of the people of Lions Bay cannot be compromised. The iconic view that helps everyone feel happy and well cannot be scarred and is in fact referenced in our OCP. Council, please be courageous, vote no. Please stand up for Lions Bay. The OCP is clear about the Village of Lions Bay valuing of nature. On page 2 of a 30-page document, quote, "It is this landscape that both attracts residents to our community and significantly shapes its character." Page 1 of our 30-page OCP, quote, "The OCP plan also provides a measure of certainty about the future of community." Page 3, quote, the OCP points out what the people in Lions Bay care about, as it was based on a consultative planning process. This is the direct quote. "It will remain valid for the long term," end quote. These points are made strongly, emphatically, and at the beginning of the document so that people understand this document is a guiding light. This document gets opened to be revised, and the last revision was under Mayor Max Wyman, and it was a 1-year plus consultative process, and the original document was under Mayor Broughton, and that was a 1-year plus consultative document that was preceded by a year of planning with the community, with all of the community members involved, invited, and communicated with regularly. Council must vote no and value the official community plan. Respecting nature and environment is one of the 8 core values that are identified, and valuing the environment and nature is the first one that's outlined in that document. The certainty of the future. The purpose of an OCP is so that the community can be certain about its future, certain about the values that are committed to, and certain that it would be in a broad-based, community-wide discussion before those values are altered in any way. A cell phone tower, with all due respect to the previous speaker, is not in the cards for this land. This Crown land is designated green space parkland for a reason. It was designated as such in the 1990s for safety reasons, because of the geography, and also because of the landscape. We don't know what this technology will do in terms of radioactive material into our watershed, which is really falling right under Harvey Creek. We don't know what it will do in terms of exacerbating cancer and what it does to brain activity. I had my nephew, was knocked on the door in Trail, BC, and by Tech Kaminko and asked to move out because of a child in the house. And it wasn't on current emissions, it was because of former emissions. They took his entire home apart and replaced everything. They didn't know him, he's a trucker. This is why Lions Bay is too small to be a petri dish in an experiment that is controversial. So controversial that the former president of Microsoft is fully, firmly, and publicly against it. So controversial that all of Berkeley is against it, but council pushed it through during the COVID crisis, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll wrap up by saying I value and respect council. I value and respect that councils have to be curious. They have to find new things. They have to look for solutions. And sometimes we get so far down the path, we have to also remember that it is an obvious no to some projects, such as when I had a BC Hydro contract for a run of the river, and we just needed to say no because at the very last, we were about to vote on it, noise came up as a consideration. We have to say no, just like when we looked at incineration for the pit. It was such a good idea, but we ultimately had to say no. These things, councils have to be strong and committed to the good and welfare of all, and certainly to the OCP. It is not within the purview of council to even be able to vote on whether there's a cell tower or not. The cell tower cannot go there. You cannot do spot zoning change like this. And so thank you very much. I really respect council. I respect your seat and how challenging it is, but I also respect your right to stand up and say no. Through your vote, vote no. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Carla, Mr. Massa is next. And where is he?
I think he left.
Did he-
Oh no, he's there.
Did he leave? I don't see him. Hang on. Oh, there, Mr. Massa? Can you come on?
Hi, it's not Mr., it's Mrs.
Mrs. Oh, okay, Mrs. Massa, your 2 minutes of fame starts now.
Okay, now I don't, I mean, I didn't come on to speak about the cell phone tower, which I hear everybody's talking about, but if I get a chance, I would say I'm against it because of the electromagnetic field and a lot of other things that it causes. I came to hear about the tree committee and their decision. So I can wait until then, or I can just talk for 2 minutes.
Sorry, my hearing just kind of dropped out. You were here to speak about which again?
Tree committee.
The tree committee
Oh, the tree committee.
application, number 3, Brunswick Beach.
And it's more controversial.
And I would suggest that Ms. Massa be asked to speak about it now. Now is the time to have public participation in advance of council considering that item later on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much, CAO. Mrs. Massa, your 2 minutes of fame continues.
Okay, thank you. So it's about our little corner in Brunswick Beach, number 1, number 3, number 5. Number 3 sold recently. The owner wants to build a new home and he's taken down the trees, and then he put in an application for probably looking into the health of the trees on the esplanade. It was reviewed and the report was that maybe in the future with the sea level rises and salt water, these trees would not be healthy to keep. And the other opinion was keep them and trim them and top them. Now, the 2 that are in front of our property, number 5, I think if we're worried about their health and we want to trim them and top them, they will end up looking like a telephone pole. So either we decide to completely get rid of them or keep them as they are and just bear with the danger of them falling down. I don't know. But one of them is definitely not good looking. The two that are in front of our property, one of them, which is towards the west, is definitely not looking good. And the owner of number 3 has the same opinion. Number 1 being a tree lover, not that we are not tree lovers, she's not worried about the future. So.
All right, thank you very much. And CAO, so those of us, I've been on the site, so I'm familiar. You know which trees we're talking about?
I would have to refresh my memory when we get to the application.
As will I. Thank you very much. So, Mrs. Massa, I'm going to guess that you might want to get yourself a pot of coffee and come back in another hour and a half. We'll be ready.
I'm actually working in the kitchen, so I'm fine.
Good. Well, do lots of chores then.
Okay.
And there you go. There we go. So thank you very much. Last one up, and this would be either Myron or Susan, if you choose to speak. Now is the time.
Who is it?
Susan or Myron?
Oh, Lieutenant.
Going, one more time.
Or maybe you have to push unmute. Does she have to push unmute?
They're on the mute then, so they're not answering.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, yeah, I unmuted.
Oh, there we go.
I'm just listening to what's being said. Thanks, Mayor McLaughlin.
Sorry, you would like to speak for Joe?
She's just listening.
She's just listening. Thank you very much, Susan.
I'm just listening.
All right, thank you very much, and that concludes the public portion of this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
We have somebody named Vincent Turcott.
He doesn't want to speak.
Carla tells me he does not wish to speak.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the list, Carla. You've got that. Okay, so thank you. That's for the public participation. And again, on the amendment to the agenda, we will go to the delegation part, which will be Darren, Hurd, and Tanya from SBA and Synergy Land Services, respectively. And so we'll give the floor to both of you two, and then that will be followed by the CAO. All right, so Darren, Tanya, you are up.
Thank you. Tanya, I think you're still on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Did you want me to start, or Darren, yourself?
How about I start, and then we'll conclude with your summary.
Certainly.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, Darren.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd first like to thank staff, mayor, and council for all the efforts put into this project to date. I'd also like to thank all the residents of Lions Bay for contributing to the public consultation, as well as attending tonight. You clearly care about your community. I'll gladly invite any questions from council at the end of my allotted time. So I'm attending online tonight as we close out the public consultation process for the RFP that was awarded to SBA with the goal of improving the poor wireless service in Lions Bay for first responders, residents, and businesses. This public consultation process started back in October of last year and has been a lengthy and comprehensive one, far beyond the default Industry Canada guidelines. And this was done to be as transparent as possible. The analogy that I like to use for poor wireless service in a community is that it's much like a pothole in a municipal road. When there's a pothole, the municipality has an obligation to fix it. You can't just ignore it, it just gets worse the longer you leave it. There are clearly wireless service issues in Lions Bay from all the feedback. This is only going to get worse, even for people who feel their service is currently satisfactory. The main wireless services primarily come from Bowen Island for those who have line of sight. But there's only so much one site can handle for capacity. So for those whose wireless service is poor, it will get worse. And for the residents whose wireless service seems okay, it will continue to degrade year after year as usage increases exponentially and strains the current coverage site. Under our current COVID-19 situation, usage and reliance on wireless communication is higher and more important than ever before. You consider now you have potentially 2 adults and 2 children all working from home and homeschooling using multiple devices. And this presents a whole new set of challenges. On Bowen Island, there's Rogers, Freedom, TELUS, there's ISPs, BC Hydro, Ecom, they're all in existing towers. Actually, SBA owns one of those towers. So as usage continues to increase and the demand for many wireless services continues to grow and devices do more, get faster, Bowen Island signal will be strained heavily, if not already at capacity. The only way to ensure improved service is to have a new infrastructure to support what really already exists. In fact, major carriers are having to build more sites across Canada just to service the existing clients, not even necessarily gaining new ones. Topography in Lions Bay is very challenging, as you know, with the slope and the trees. Best frequencies for such unique areas are the lower bands, such as 600 megahertz. The spectrum propagates much better than the higher bands and is able to navigate more effectively through trees, buildings, and by diffraction can bend around obstructions. Higher frequencies are not as effective in areas such as Lions Bay, as much as they're in higher urban areas such as downtown Vancouver, for instance. However, even with lower frequencies, wireless service will greatly improve. Based on feedback from Charlie Bradbury's survey, roughly 1/3 of the respondents seem to be not satisfied with their service. And that's a significant amount of residents that are unsatisfied with the current wireless service. And that's the people who actually took the survey. Find there are many residents in these circumstances who want the tower and services, but they stay home and they hope it happens. Residents opposed and seeking answers to questions are usually the most outspoken and attended meetings. I've shared the coordinates of the proposed tower with all 3 major telco companies, and they have all expressed high interest in co-locating. This has also been further supported by the addition of Section 6.3A of the license agreement between Lions Bay and SBA to guarantee those tenants have top positions on the tower and to ensure the much needed services. The fact that SBA is paying for the construction of the single tower makes it more appealing for the telcos to co-locate. It also makes it more appealing for the community as it limits the need for multiple towers with 1 carrier on each. Health and safety is a foremost concern on a daily basis, and especially now. I'm a dad, I have an 8-year-old, so I'm thinking about safety all the time, and I get how important that is, and so do all of you. I've been working in telecommunications for over 20 years, and I still have to rely on the experts to tell me what's safe, and the experts who regulate it tell me the technology is safe. As an added measure, I also ensure I employ safe wireless practices. This is something everyone can do with his or her devices and inside their homes. The RFP process undertaken by staff and council is the most responsible path in trying to solve the wireless service problems in your community. The revenues flow back into the municipality. And going forward, there's 0 operational costs for the village. It also avoids depleting staff resources going forward with issues such as renewals, equipment adds, changes, new co-location applications, agreements, setting fees, collecting rents, and these are all handled by SBA. Going forward, any future inquiries for towers can just simply be forwarded to SBA's location, reducing the proliferation of towers. Reliable service in Lions Bay was critical when we started this project, and now it's even more critical. It's very important that as many residents, businesses, and first responders have access to this essential service, not just a few. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. Tanya, are you next up, or are we all set? Tanya, you're still on mute.
I got it.
Okay.
Got it back. Yeah, I just have a few words. I can just summarize the public consultation process. Basically speak to the report that was submitted. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with respect to the public consultation portion of this project. Synergy Land Services, on behalf of SBA, with direction from the Village of Lions Bay, conducted the public consultation regarding the proposed cell tower at Harvey Creek Water Plant. We attempted to engage the public using various avenues of communication. Forming part of that plan was the circulation of approximately 550 to 600 information packages, which were hand-delivered to the community mailboxes by the Village of Lions Bay. Posters were put on 4 separate community notice boards 2 newspaper ads were submitted, one in the Peak News magazine, one in the North Shore News. There were consecutive running notices in the Village Update. And finally, we hosted an open house where the community was invited to come and learn about the project and voice their concerns in person. Results of the consultation are as follows. We had 23 people attend the open house. We had 31 participant feedback collected in writing. That includes what was submitted at the open house. Of the comments collected, 18 participants reflected that they were in favor of the project, 12 were against, and 1 just had a neutral question. The 3 primary concerns were visual aesthetics, health and safety, and location. Back and forth written consultation was conducted and concluded as per Industry Canada's required timeline. And as you know, details, should you need them, are in the summary we submitted for your review. In conclusion, as Darren stated, I do believe it's important to note that the requirements to engage the community that were instilled by the Village of Lions Bay have far exceeded the minimum necessary outlined by Industry Canada. You guys have done a really good job. Industry Canada minimum public consultation requirements for a tower of this height would have included notification to residents within 3 times tower height. The proposed tower is 60 meters. That would have been a notification radius of only 180 meters. It might have just reached the residents at the bottom of the hill at the road there. And it would have included 1 newspaper ad. That's it. So just with that thought in mind, I want to thank you again. Thank again all the participants, all the people who participated in this process. And upon review, we respectfully request you consider granting concurrence to proceed with this project.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and Darren again. And I think we'll now go to the CAO for his preamble on this as well. And then I will read the recommendation, and then we will go to discussion, and it will be the CAO and as subject matter experts, perhaps Darren and Tanya may be called in on something too. So if that's fine, then CAO DeJong, could you proceed, please?
Okay. So I'd like to just quickly, I'm not going to belabor the report that I'm sure you've all read, but I do want to touch on some of the highlights. In terms of the background, that was commenced in 2017 at the request of the Infrastructure Committee, who was aware of all the various issues with cell phone reception throughout Lions Bay and the history of that, as well as some of the benefits that could be gained from having a cell tower to enhance the ability of the village to look after its infrastructure through connection to SCADA networks, which are connected to our water treatment plants and can be connected to our PRVs, which enable staff to monitor and take corrective actions to maintain our infrastructure at all times, regardless of whether they're in the village during the daytime or whether they're at home and on call. So it's a 24/7 proposition, and it just can't be done without remote access. Currently, remote access is very difficult. It's spotty, it's not reliable, and as we go forward, it's going to become worse. I'm not going to go over the items that were highlighted at the October 1st meeting, where council essentially approved the agreement in principle, subject to the consultation process going forward. And that consultation process we heard was very extensive, especially compared to the minimum requirements of Industry Canada. In terms of the public feedback and responses, I've noted in the report, I think I've caught all of the concerns and we'll just call them concerns in terms of this tower going forward, and they're labeled in Part C of the report, A through K. I've then expanded on the bases of those concerns and noted some of the responses and that were provided and additional information that wasn't available at the time, such as the amendment of the agreement to include section 6.3, which essentially ensures that the top 3 positions on the communications tower are reserved for cellular telecommunications providers and no other type without our consent. That was an important change to the agreement that I think was more or less in good faith between the parties, always understood. But through the consultation process, concerns were raised that we really didn't have anything solid by all appearances to the public. And so we went back and had those discussions and put into writing the commitment that was always there unofficially in good faith as we had proceeded through the negotiation of the agreement over a course of about 2 years. So I think that shows and points out the importance and the efficacy of the consultation process. That was pointed out by a couple of residents as something that was perhaps lacking and could be strengthened. And so we went about taking that advice and taking care of it. So I think that's a good sign that we had a robust consultation process. In terms of the lack of assurances that were expressed regarding improvement of cellular service coverage, I think that between that amendment and you heard Mr. Hurd talk about the interest and expected commitment of the top 3 telcos in our site. Essentially, as I understand it, and I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong, but those companies have programs that enable them to determine whether a site is expected to have good propagation or signal strength to enable their services to be successful. And the fact that they are still interested at this point and very enthusiastically interested suggests that those propagation analyses are good, not something that they share with the public or willingly because it's a competitive industry. Those are things that they keep under their own hats. They have their own methodologies for doing it, and but they're all interested. So that suggests strongly that signal strength and location is not going to be an issue. That'll be borne out through the process that would ensue if council approves the project to ensure that in fact that is the case. Indications at this point are good. In terms of the assertion that cell service in Lions Bay is not that bad, and to the extent that it's less than satisfactory, it's a relatively new phenomenon that should be correctable. I think you've already heard Mr. Hurd talk about it's not going to be correctable unless we proceed with implementing new infrastructure, as the old infrastructure coming from Bowen has pretty much reached capacity. There are comments throughout the report and the materials from some of the respondents, particularly at pages 164 to 189 of the red numbered pages, including comments from the Deputy Fire Chief as to the lack of cell phone reception in and around the fire hall and his concerns about that. We have in the on-table correspondence additional indications from Search and Rescue from Mr. Langford as to the fact that they frequently have issues with cell phone coverage, not only at the fire hall, which is bad enough in and of itself, but also at the school field where they generally deal with helicopter landings. So he's definitely in support of improving that capacity and capability. I've also noticed just in my own anecdotal experience over the last 4.5 years that all around the municipal complex, cell phone reception is not good. In terms of the allegedly relatively minor compensation for the municipality, staff did do their homework and spoke to other jurisdictions, and what we have in front of us is in line with the compensation that is paid out on these kinds of arrangements, and in fact very closely reflects the sort of compensation that another municipality negotiated as well. Over the life of the agreement, it amounts to a substantial sum of money, over 30 years, about $750,000 on an annual basis of $25,000 or so, and that's a combination of rent of $1,400 a month and 20% on lease commissions from sub-licensees after the first licensee. You know, it's undeniable that a cell tower on the landscape is going to change the landscape. We see evidence of those kinds of changes all around us. As you drive up the Sea to Sky corridor, you look over at Bowen and you see all of those towers on top of that pristine island. At one time, it had nothing on it. It's still a wonderful place to be. It's still something that, as you look and look over at the island and other islands, after a while, you don't even see the towers. It blends into you know your mind absorbs that kind of thing. And I can also point to towers at Furry Creek, in Squamish above Alice Lake, and on top of Black Tusk. There's an iconic mountain in a tourism enthusiastic zone where they try to get the world to come to Whistler. Everybody drives past that Black Tusk, and you've got a couple of huge towers sitting right at the top, right below the Tusk, right on the knoll. And you don't hear too much complaint about it. I'm sure there was at the time they went in. I know that one of them was added during the time that I lived in Pinecrest, which is directly across from Black Tusk. But after a while, your mind stops seeing it, and you look at the beauty, and the tower becomes part of the landscape. No, it's not perfect, but there are a lot of benefits to be gained from it, and sometimes we have to compromise.
That's right in our OCP.
I think in terms, sorry, did somebody ask me something? In terms of the OCP, I'd like to speak to that for a moment. And as the report notes, there are numerous aspects and benefits from having a cell tower that will enhance the principles that are in the LCP. These include watershed stewardship. You know, as stewards of the watershed, and we rely so much upon that watershed, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that that watershed can provide for the long-term sustainability of our community. And that is what the UBC Watershed Research Project is all about. And it's a very important consideration for the community. It's a long-range study, and it's going to study the effects on our watershed, the effects of climate change, and on our future supply of potable water. And that study, you know, we committed to a memorandum of understanding with scientists from UBC. They based their that commitment, they relied on that commitment to go out and get grants totaling a lot of money. I think it's over $300,000 worth of grants that relies upon the ability to collect data wirelessly and transmit it back to UBC. If they can't do that, it becomes a very difficult prospect to go forward with that study. Everything would have to become reliant upon students. It would be very labor intensive. The opportunities for increases in errors go way up, and it slows the whole process down and adds years to the project, which is already a 5 to 10 year kind of time frame. So it's really an important aspect, and one of the, I'll say it's one of the key considerations that was on the minds of the Infrastructure Committee when they recommended the project to Council. Another aspect of the OCP is strengthening our community. And improved wireless technology enables working from home, so we can telecommute, we can cut down on actual commuting and greenhouse gases, we can improve connectivity to each other on social networks, and I think we're seeing that now, and I think everyone ought to take note that, you know, this could last for a long time, and I think our world is going to change in terms of what it looks like afterwards, and we may see a lot more telecommuting and working from home than we ever did before. People are going to get used to it, and we're going to be that much more reliant on wireless networks. The OCP looks to ensuring a safe community. This technology will provide for enhanced 911 services. You know, we're on the cusp of next generation 911 services that will enable transmission of photographs via text and other abilities that will enhance the safety of residents and visitors in our backcountry, and certainly enhance the safety of our community and our responders who are trying to do that job. Providing effective services. As I mentioned, these wireless communications enable our Public Works Department to provide important, vital services. You know, our critical infrastructure is maintained through wireless services that are reliant upon cellular technology. Meeting responsibilities and governance. And there's many ways that touch on some of the things I've already mentioned that enhance Council's ability to meet its responsibilities in governance. If I just pause for a moment. In terms of potential health implications, I'll get into that in a little bit more depth. And I'll just go to that now. So the report touches on, in Part D, Health Canada materials that are appended to the report. And I hope that everybody took the time to read through those materials carefully. There's a lot of really, really good information in there. And it comes from agencies with the federal government that are tasked with ensuring the health and safety of all Canadians. So we've got our Consumer and Clinical Radiation Protection Bureau, the Environmental and Radiation Health Sciences Directorate, and Healthy Environments and Consumer Safety Branch. These people are all devoted and dedicated to the health and safety of Canadians. The materials that have been alluded to by some of the residents in terms of their concerns about health issues, much of those materials, I note, actually relate to other wireless technologies, not just cell towers. So much of it talks about issues related to cell phones themselves, your wireless networks in your home, your baby monitors, your microwave oven, all the different things in your daily life that have electromagnetic frequency waves bandying about. And so it's important to recognize that, you know, the cell tower antenna itself is something that is separate and apart from all the other wireless devices that people have in their homes and that they use on a daily basis. Those decisions and the manner in which people use those devices are personal choices that everybody can make. You don't have to use wireless devices if you don't want to. If you're concerned about it, there are a number of safety steps and tips that you can take, and a number of those are listed in bullet form on page 11 of the report. And I'm just going to note the fourth and fifth ones that talk about waiting until you get a good signal, because cell phones put out higher levels of RF energy to connect with cell towers when the signal is weak. Well, that speaks right there to the need to have a cell tower where you've got increased reception, so you've got a good signal and your phone isn't having to emit higher levels of radiation in order to try and connect to the tower. You know, that's something something that also alludes to that is, and I'll quote from the BC Center for Disease Control: as technology has improved, the RF energy emitted from individual cell phones has decreased. As the cell phone network is enlarged with more antennas installed, cell phones require less power to connect to the network, thereby lowering the user's exposure to RF waves. So a cell tower can be beneficial in terms of reducing the RF exposures of our residents who want to continue using wireless devices. So every individual family has the ability and the freedom to implement those steps if they so choose. It's important to note as well that Health Canada relies upon scientific evidence. They consider all peer-reviewed scientific studies and employ a weight of evidence approach. So what that means is that studies, you know, not all studies are created equal. Lots of them have aspects that are fail to take into account all kinds of different aspects that result in them not being considered to be a robust study. And so, you know, they look at that as well as the number of studies and the strength of those studies. You know, did they have good methodologies employed? And that enters into the equation in an important way. Going going to Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and run through a quick presentation with respect to radio frequency, energy, and safety. And I'll try to make it quick. Let's see how that goes. Where did it go? I've lost it. My apologies. Oh, here we are. Okay. Let me just try that again. And sorry. Okay. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just, sorry, I just need to resize my window a bit here. So this is from Public Health and Safety Canada, and just going to, so it talks about wireless devices, towers, and antenna installations, and the differences between what is radio frequency energy and examples of it. We've got the electromagnetic spectrum, which shows us both non-ionizing energy and ionizing energy, and you can see all the different things that we have in non-ionizing energy and where that sits on the spectrum, and the level of safety that is relative to other wireless items that are in our daily lives. It's the ionizing energy in the higher end of the band that we see harmful things like X-rays and gamma rays that we have to be careful about. You know, every aspect of our life has we see day-to-day uses of RF energy, and the government has provided RF exposure limits to prevent bad effects from affecting our health. The approach of Canada to RF exposure safety is among the most stringent in the world, and let me just go back up here. I just want to talk a little bit about Safety Code 6 here. You know, the Safety Code 6 is the guideline by which all wireless devices have to comply, and the regulators set those limits very conservatively and build in a number of additional levels of safety, such that anyone, including a small child, who's exposed to RF energy from multiple sources within Safety Code 6 limits for every day for a whole year, there would be no adverse effects. That tells you what kind of restrictions and limits on safety that Health Canada takes. In terms of antenna installations, these also must meet RF exposure requirements, and Industry Canada routinely audits these installations to make sure that they do comply with Safety Code 6 limits. Just gonna skip ahead. So this gives you an indication, you probably also recognize this, this graphic from the response materials that were sent out by SBA, and it really kind of shows you the safety margin that is built into Canada's limits. You know, there's for wireless devices, there's different tests that are used. Devices that are used close to the body follow one set of guidelines and testing procedures, and you can read through this and determine what the SAR limits are for specific absorption rates that cell phones have to comply with. In terms of so, question, are SAR limits the same around the world? Well, Canada and the US have the same SAR limits. Other countries, such as Australia, European Union, and others have adopted limits recommended by the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, or ICNIRP guidelines, which are less strict. Those guidelines have been updated recently in 2020, and as I understand it, we're done so to try to achieve the same levels of safety for SAR limits that Canada and the US had. I'm just gonna skip. Sorry. So there's a lot of good information there, and at the end they talk about small cell networks and 5G, and it should be noted that the 5G safety requirements are the same as they are, you know, they fall within the same spectrum as the current LTE-4 requirements. They're well within those limits, and in terms of recent information to support that assertion, I can point to a couple of things. Sorry, one moment. So there's studies that have come out recently in the UK having to do with tests that were run on over 16 5G towers, and those limits, or the limits were discovered by Ofcom, which is the UK regulator, found no identifiable risks in those tests. The 5G band was 0.039% of the recommended exposure limit. So it wasn't even scratching 1% of the recommended exposure limit. That was over 16 locations in 10 cities across the UK where 5G enabled mobile base stations have been set up. As well, there was another BBC article that I came across that talked about the new rules that have been enacted by the NIRCP, whatever it's called. The adjustments that were made actually don't even relate to limits on 5G towers. They relate to the phones themselves. So the increased restrictions that were enacted by Europe and others that follow the NCIRP relate to cell phones and provide a slightly higher level of protection than current guidelines for radiation from handsets. They don't relate to towers, which have already been determined to be within safe limits, well within safe limits. So I think the 5G concerns are a bit of a red herring. It's not substantially different technology. The wavelengths are a bit shorter, and I'm sure they'll continue to be studied in detail by scientists around the world. And it's comforting to know that our Health Canada scientists regularly review those studies and take note of any new developments and incorporate them into Safety Code 6. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay. Sorry, that was a bit of a dry presentation. I'd like to just move on to cell tower benefits to wrap this up. And that can be found on page 13 of the report. So just quickly going through that, a cell tower will address the increasing degradation of cellular connectivity. Without new infrastructure, such services will continue to deteriorate, as you heard from Mr. Hurd, and residents have clearly already begun to notice the changes. Support for connectivity of Lions Bay infrastructure through SCADA is an important consideration, and enhancement of such connectivity is very important for the municipality in terms of ensuring the health and safety of its residents in relation to its critical infrastructure. Cell tower will provide the ability to support our strategic research agreement with UBC, as I've alluded to, and provides a steady stream of income, which is commensurate with what it ought to be, and not insignificant. The location of the tower is such that it won't be seen by a lot of people, residents in Lions Bay, whose views are primarily oriented toward Howe Sound. It'll mostly be seen if you're out on the water, I think. But it's a lot better than having a tower down at the foot of our community where everyone would be looking at it right in your face, more or less. Notwithstanding that, that would likely provide better coverage. Improved cellular service will enhance our ability to support our parking revenue, our parking meter revenue. As you know, we've consistently had issues in the past in terms of connectivity and the problems that that results in terms of people being able to purchase parking and in terms of the administrative costs associated with dealing with those issues. As you know, under provincial legislation, we're headed toward electric vehicles, and so we're going to need to have the same ability to have robust cellular technology to enable people to pay for charging their electric vehicles if we're going to have charging stations in Lions Bay. Improved emergency services I've alluded to in terms of 911 and next generation services, and our own LB Alert will be enhanced further as well. And I think that's more or less everything I've got on the subject matter.
Thank you very much, CAO. What we'll do now is I will read the staff recommendation. I will then call the motion, ask for a seconder, and then we'll go to a discussion amongst council. And
Mr. Mayor?
yes?
In terms of the recommendations, number 2 refers to a date which is effective 17th day of March. I think that should be the 5th day of May, today's date, as we did not proceed on the 17th day of March.
Okay, thank you very much. Good pickup. All right, so once we get through the motion, I'll just go through this one more time. So the staff recommendation, which is just a matter of putting this forward. So Council confirmed the public consultation process for the SBA Canada cell tower proposal was carried out in accordance with the process approved by Council at the October 1st, 2019 Council meeting. Part 2, that the telecommunications tower option and license agreement be approved as amended to provide for the addition of subsection 6.3A, effective as of the 5th day of May 2020. Item number 3, that the mayor and the corporate officer be authorized to execute the said telecommunications tower option and license agreement as amended. Item 4, that the chief administrative officer be authorized to execute the draft letter of concurrence for SBA Canada to forward to Innovation, Science and Economic Development, which is short for ISED Canada. And item 5, that the CAO be authorized to proceed with all associated steps required to give effect to the foregoing resolutions. Can I have somebody put that motion forward with the hands? And I'm looking at guests all across the wall. Thank you. I see a first and a second. So the motion is in play. We are now at the discussion phase, and we have our three subject matter experts, and council is encouraged to forward questions beforehand, and this would be the chance to ask any more, or if you didn't get satisfaction of what you had asked for before, please go now. Go on the show of hand, and I'll go that order. Well, this is a first. There being none.
Sorry, there's none what?
Okay. That resonates with a lot. All right, so gentlemen and Councillor Cunliffe, I'll ask again. Any questions? If so, please indicate using the hand on your monitor. All right, thank you. There being none, then I will call the motion. And I will begin by saying that I will make a very brief statement and indicate my vote, and then we will go through the councillors in counter-rotational order with Councillor Cunliffe, Councillor Barmere, Councillor Bain, Councillor Abbott. Excuse me. My family has resided in Lions Bay for over 40 years. I will live the closest to the communications tower if it proceeds. Not to be repetitive on the benefits of the tower, I observed a large number of these against the major perceived negative and the lesser objections. Of the latter, I truly wish the communication tower would be less obtrusive to the few villagers who would regularly see it. When I consider the benefits to the communication tower to the community as a whole, I find they outweigh the negative. I respect the view of every individual opposed to the communication tower, but I am voting in favor of it as put forward by the motion. Councillor Cunliffe, you have the floor.
Okay, I'd like to start with that this was an initiative by previous council. Can everyone hear me well?
You're heard well.
Okay, that I inherited. And my understanding was that the objective was to support SCADA technology, perhaps the UBC hydrology study, and the hope to improve cell service. One of the first proposed sites by the IC, I believe, included the Harvey water tank, but also the fire hall. By no means do I believe that the IC would have been in favor of a 60-meter tower based at the fire hall. So where it morphed into something that could accommodate those three things to 60 meters that will forever change the landscape, I'm not sure. I cannot, in good faith, support this initiative. It's incongruent with our mission statement, which is splendor in serenity. And there's other ways to accomplish these things. There's no guarantee that our cellular coverage will be supported and or enhanced. And a good show of faith would have been to have basically a written agreement in good faith with a major provider. I just absolutely cannot support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Barmeyer? You're on mute, Councillor Barmeyer.
Sorry about that.
You're good?
Yeah, this has been weighing heavy on me, this tower, and I had to go back and recreate the timeline for myself from where it started with an IC recommendation. And to echo Jamie's sentiment, I don't think the IC had envisioned a tower of that magnitude up on Harvey. So there's a digression there that I was having a hard time understanding. The other piece is that there was what seems to be very little public consultation on location selection and what the actual visual with that part. Really the only time we reached out to the public was with SBA's open house. And that's when people started talking, that's when the community started getting into this in more depth. And the timing just happens to be that we're all at home and a lot of us are walking the streets, so you come across neighbors and you chat. And I hadn't come across anyone supporting it. So that was an indicator for me. And then we look at the residents' correspondence that we got, most, if not all, against, with a few people supporting it the last few days. The public comments we got on various media, I mean, I've got a list of names here that I wanted to read out, but it's over 100 people that are concerned for various reasons, and misalignment with the OCP being one of them. About the dual impact of the tower and the sort of irreversible nature of that impact. So, I think for me, the sort of main concerns are a lack of refined alignment with the OCP. The tower does meet objectives. It does, but it meets it like a sledgehammer. It doesn't meet it in sort of a surgical and refined way that aligns with the OCP, that respects the natural environment, and that actually guarantees, something in return for us. We talk about location selection, tower height, and the aesthetic impact, and I can't say enough about that. That really should have been run by the community in a respectful way, with drawings and true renderings and a model, and something where people can get their head around what they're signing up for. So that piece was missing. There should have been far more public participation early on in the process, and I don't see that. I don't see any record of that, so I struggle on that side. And really, for me, the scope creep from where it started, to where it ended up is a bit. Just the gap is too wide for me. So unfortunately, I'm a no.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barmeyer. Councillor Bain.
Yeah, I was part of the IC that was recommending this, and it came down to two major things. One was control of the water treatment facilities, with the communication of it, and also with the UBC hydrology study. I thought those are two key functions going on in our community that they're a challenge to handle at the present day, and I think they're too important to let drift. It just seemed to me like it was a great idea to get all this stuff in place so we could improve the safety of the staff for the water treatment communication, and also increase the quick response when something happens to do with the water treatment plants as well. And the option of adding on PRB control as well is another big plus. I don't know if we could really do it without it. So I still support the IC's recommendation of the cell tower for going to council. As the process moved on, a lot of health concerns came up, and it concerned me. There's some very credible people came up with impassioned concerns, and so I started looking into it. And I did sort of a search on the internet and for studies and everything, independent of what the CIO has come up with too. But oddly enough, I came across the Health Canada Safety Code 6 as well, and the ICNIRP, International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. And those two in particular, and there's a whole swath of them. I won't waste your time going over each one of them, but those two of them in particular convinced me that the health concerns are already factored in, and I don't believe putting a cell tower is going to cause any harm to our citizens. And I respect the people who have concerns, and we should be able to speak out, but quite frankly, I think the fears are unfounded. So I'm still in favor of moving ahead with the cell tower installation.
So that would be a yes as to the motion?
It would be.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abbott?
Hi. So I just want to go back to the October, well, maybe two of the previous decisions. The first council in March 2017 elected to move this forward, and the short sentence that they moved on finished with, which also addressed municipal needs for SCADA system. I wasn't there, I wasn't part of the infrastructure committee, but I think these kind of needs, as Councillor Barmeyer kind of alluded to earlier, was one thing that maybe where this started. But as others have said, doesn't seem to be where it ended, and I think I was going to use the sledgehammer as well when I said that. The next thing is what we talk about now, October 1st, 2019. It reads, Council approve the license with the agreement with SBA subject only to issues. Peter actually earlier didn't mention the word issues when he repeated that statement, but it's issues that arise out of the consultation process. For me, issues out of the consultation process needs to be issues that get addressed, and I know you will never satisfy everyone every step of the time, but you need to at least allay the majority of those fears and certainly all the reasonable ones. I don't believe we've done that. I believe the response we're still seeing from villagers in not insignificant numbers, and what people have said to me and spoken to me, I don't believe we've met that criteria. I was going to talk about my opinion in the top three, and why I think that, and maybe I'll still do that briefly. It's going to echo some of the other things that I've said. Location and aesthetics is definitely a big thing, and that is certainly something that we have not put residents' concerns addressed on. I think the graphic shown in the presentation that shows this fade into insignificance tower, it represents nothing like it's what it's going to be. Photographs taken of the water and the CIO's reference to you won't even see it if you're on a ferry. Well, maybe because the photograph is taken from a yacht. But I find it hard to believe that when I drive across Cross Creek and I look up at the mountain, which I do all the time, I went to habit doing it. When I first moved here, when I was skiing a lot, trying to look at the snowpack, I don't cross that creek without looking up at that view. And I don't see how this tower is not going to completely destroy that. On the health issues, I don't know. On the health issues, there seems to be a lot of evidence. I've read everything I can. There are certainly people, there's a lot of authorities that have actually come out and given us evidence that says it's true, but we cannot go past residents' concerns again. And their concerns and how they will react to those concerns and comfortable where they live is the reality that we need to address and we haven't addressed. So for those reasons, I cannot support this.
So you would be opposed. Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott. The motion is defeated. Which brings us to item 13A, which is I've split the public participation, and I see there's some public here. Somebody would like to speak?
I'm sorry.
I've accelerated the public participation from the back to right now.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Happy Mother's Day. Thank
There
you
we go.
so much.
Clapping. I would like to say I've heard a real thoughtful approach. I heard a research approach, and I wish to thank each of the council members for every council member, including you, Ron, the mayor, for
let's just
you know
conclude
what?
with thank you.
Yeah. Anyway,
All right.
Thank you. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
thank you.
Your
both.
thoughtfulness.
I know you'd like to hang around here, but you're welcome to leave.
Thank you.
Okay.
There we go. All right, and you didn't lock them in, did you, Pen?
No.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Just-
Is the
yes.
OCP going to come up, the question of the OCP?
It's not on the agenda.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much. So that will conclude the public participation part of the
thank you very
evening.
much.
Thank you, villagers. Next item up is the item 8A 5, 6, 7, I think, Carla. And that is the trees at Lions Bay Beach Park and Wade Memorial Park. And CAO, you have the floor.
Could we perhaps take a pause for about 2 minutes? And just wanted to say thank you to Darren and Tanya for attending and presenting tonight. And I'm sure they probably don't want to hear us talk about trees and other such things. But thanks both of you for attending and for all the hard work. I'll be in touch tomorrow just to have a wrap-up conversation. But thank you again for all your hard work.
And actually, thank you very much, CAO, and I should have thought of that beforehand. I was rattling through the agenda. Darren and Tanya, thank you very, very much from all of the council members. It was as you can see, there was a lot of passion, a lot of discussion, but behind it all was a plan that you put forward that had an awful lot of data and meat to it. Thank you both very, very much, and as Peter says, he'll be in touch with you.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to say real quickly, in 20 years of tower applications, I don't think I've ever seen such a comprehensive, detailed report from staff in my whole career. So it's excellent work on Peter's part and very well thought through. He's obviously been doing his homework, so congratulations on your hard work there.
Thank you very much, Darren.
I can.
Be in touch tomorrow.
Thank you, and both of you guys can sign off. Thank you very much. Peter, did you want to pause for another second, or are you good to go? Does anybody need to leave? We can break for a minute if you like.
Was there any public online that wanted to participate in the?
Okay, well, I think he just.
Ruth and Goalie. Oh no, she already did.
No, I think the public.
Okay.
It's come and gone.
Okay.
All right, you got your glass of water. You ready to go?
Yep.
Done. All right, we're moving on then. Thank you. Okay, it's only 9:30. Make sure we get the motion for 10, Carla. Okay, so trees. You know, we all love trees if we don't like cell towers. You're up.
I laugh.
Nye, this is your item here, the verbal update on trees at Lions Bay Beach Park, Wade Park, and Bayview PRV site.
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to provide council with advance notice of some upcoming tree work. I've consulted with the tree committee on this work and provided some details on the 3 separate locations, and I'll provide that information to council right now. The staff have identified a dead Pacific dogwood at the Lions Bay Beach Park, adjacent to the bathroom building. It's a clump of trees, and one of those trees is dead. The bark is starting to peel, and there hasn't been any vegetation on that tree for over a year now. So staff are planning to have that tree removed while the park is closed. The other are 3 deciduous maple trees at the Phase 4-5 access road. These 3 trees are right in the location of the proposed PRV as part of the 3 PRV project. So that's on our list. And there are several evergreen trees at the northern edge of Wade Park that have been repeatedly topped over the last several years and are exhibiting signs of significant, heavy, large leaders. And staff are concerned that some of those are going to break off. So those trees are marked as part of our work. And I just wanted to give council the heads up so it doesn't come as a surprise.
Thank you very much. Our Public Works Manager, are you going to perhaps apprise the community in the village update this week of the sharpening of the chainsaw?
I hadn't planned on it. These are just operational maintenance items, but I can definitely do that.
Well, I'm not sure when your cut time is, but nothing creates phone calls like the sound of a chainsaw on public property.
Yeah, so we need to go out and get 3 quotes from companies. The trees at Wade Park are under hydro lines, so it'll have to be a specialized contractor.
Okay.
But I can put out the update before we initiate the work.
Thank you very much.
And I see Councillor Abbott has his hand up.
Yes, he does. And thank you very much, Works Manager. Councillor Abbott, unmute.
Right, okay. Common theme. And I was going to save it for a little bit later. Songbird nesting season. I have contacted our environmental and air services company, the branch of our company I work for. I asked them who we have to use when we go clear trees. If it's in songbird nesting season, and the answer is a registered professional biologist. That person only and no one else. I contacted the Wildlife Conservation Service of Canada. I asked them the same question, I got the same answer. I then asked, if that's the case, then why are there so few people being prosecuted for taking down a tree? And she confirmed, once again, it is a federal regulation for taking down trees on private property in certain circumstances. The answer was that they are lax, and in her words, they kind of relax it when it's a single tree and when it's on private property. And I said, and then who do you allow to clear? She said, the regulations still stand, and the person will still get fined, but they allow the arborist to do it. She used the word a single tree more than once in that conversation. She said, I asked her to send me something to that effect, and she said she would before the council meeting, and she did not. She might have got councillor spelled wrong or my email address wrong, so I have to reach out to her again. But I hope the works yard, at the very least, will follow the federal regulation. And if we're taking down multiple trees, it should be a registered professional biologist. That's the only person certified to do the tree clearing.
To certify that the trees are able to be removed. They wouldn't do the tree
Of
cutting.
three, of 3 of birds in the songbird nesting season.
Okay. That's doable. It will be an additional cost, as opposed to having an arborist certify them.
Or would we consider doing it outside of the songbird nesting season? I know it's an uncomfortable truth, but I'm going to keep saying this on every tree permit and every application, because I think we need to do better on this.
So we can't delay it because PRB, for one thing, we're not going to wait until the fall to do that work. We need to move forward on that. And now is an ideal time with the parks closed. So whether it's a case of having to get a certified biologist to say there's no nests, or whether I take it that what you're saying is that our bylaw does not comply with federal regulations. So we'll have to have a closer look at that. But if that's the case, then I guess we'll be hiring a certified biologist.
Well, I suggest
Yeah, we can do that.
phones the Conservation Society and explains the situation. Sees if he gets told the same thing I get told. It will be a good start.
Sorry, phone who, Councillor Abbott?
Wildlife Conservation Society Services. I went to the rat line, found a number, got through to the woman that was in charge of, conservation office. Conservation officers.
Sorry, you had said society at one point, so I just could you?
I meant, sorry, Wildlife Conservation Services, I meant to say. I apologize.
Yeah, we can do that, and if they require an RP bio, we can definitely do that. I'm not in opposition at all.
All right, so Councillor Abbott, you've raised the question. Staff have said yes. Are you good?
Yes.
Thank you. And all right, Public Works Manager, anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next thing, I'll just make mention that should you get tagged by a resident, I put considerable heat on the MP and the MLA with respect to TransLink. Council doesn't see every letter that I write back to residents, but the Mayor's Council, the TransLink executive have been continue to push hard with the provincial and the federal governments, and the mayors are all taking their part of this too. And quite frankly, when the executive director for TransLink saw what I was doing, he said, don't bother using the pro forma letter, but other ones are. Both the MP and the MLA, I've asked them to respond back to me on their position with respect to TransLink before the long weekend so that I can incorporate it into my message to the community on the 15th. And that's the end of the report there. I have nothing else, Council. Any members? Last minute? Yes, Councillor Barmayer?
I guess I just more a question than anything. So we have no leverage over the 262 bus. If they called it off, it's done. Nothing we can do.
It's done. CAO, do you want to go farther on this one?
Nope, I don't. We did explore. I put forward a proposal for 2 trips a day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, as a sort of minimal service to meet critical needs of those who require those services. But that just, we weren't near the threshold of pain that was entering into their decision-making process. And we did try, but didn't get very far in that. And the reasons that were provided are echoed in the piece that I put into the village update on Friday. And that was the message that we got loud and clear. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bowen's in the same boat. Yeah, it's a very unfortunate circumstance, and I think that it bears upon us to try to put as much pressure as possible on the provincial governments to step up and support the TransLink service. So because it's just a vital service that everybody needs. So
How much do we pay? How much do we pay for that bus?
250,000.
About 250,000
a year.
Their cost is about 350 plus non-operational staff overhead and sundry overhead.
But we don't pay anymore? Is that it? Or we still pay?
Well, that's what the village pays. What we, the greater we pay to TransLink.
Despite them canceling the bus, we pay that anyways?
Yes, I can tell you that it's also provincially stipulated. That's part of the province's alleged bailout for the municipalities. They got to skate on the school tax until the end of the year, but all the interagency stuff had to be paid.
Yep.
Councillor Abbott?
Sorry, so, yeah, I'm just going with what Councillor Bonner was saying there. Also seen these letters and heard from residents I know who depend on the bus. So if this carries on for a considerable time, we are going to have to continue to pay $250,000 for no service. If they give it a zero service, I mean, I can understand if you've got diminished service because they're trying to save costs. But they're giving us nothing. So why are we still paying?
Well,
the objective and the hope is that we'll see that service come back in September or sooner if that's possible. But that's in terms of the people who do use the service, they generally use it to get to other parts of the service, and those parts of the service that are still operating in a much reduced manner will be, we're paying for the opportunity and the right to use the whole system, not just the right to use the 262 bus. So the right to use the whole system still exists. Difficulty for Heinz Bayers is getting from here to there and use the rest of the system.
I would argue if your connection to the system isn't there, then you don't have access to the system. But anyway, I know we're trying to do as best we can. I think this is a serious issue for some people, small number of people, but for them it's very, very important. So I don't know, I would keep banging away at this and see what we can do.
We have reached out as well to the volunteer network, and hopefully they'll be able to meet some of the most critical needs of those who require transportation services.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Cunliffe?
Yeah, I just think we need to hammer on this point here as well. Just deleting service and making us pay is not okay. So I know our hands are tied, it's a very bizarre scenario, but it does need to be pressed. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Trust me, this is maybe not the first thing I talk about in my weekly meetings with the MP and the MLA, but it's certainly in the top 3.
Glad to hear.
Thank you very much. All right, so
any media traction? Any point in sort of saying anything to the media about this, or is that just nonsense?
it's not going to work because the root of cash comes, where does the cash come from, Councillor Bram? It's the province, which has completely abdicated themselves on this and thinking it's a federal issue, and the feds who are fighting a multi-front war. And it's not just the TransLink, that is the Metro TransLink, Toronto TransLink, Montreal TransLink, they're all dying too. It's the same deal. Literally, the United States has funded their transit system and Canada's done nothing across the board. So it's a really big issue. And because of our minute, well, we rank number 217 out of 217 in route patronage. So they're not rushing to our door to correct. I think we got to move on because time is moving on here. I believe there's no council contribution. Committees, which is the trees, views, and landscape on your agenda. And this is tree application number 102 at 3 Brunswick. And it's detailed here, and I'm not going to go through it, other than that the Trees, Views, Landscapes Committee recommends to Council that Council approves tree application number 102, 3 Brunswick Beach Road, with the following provisions, and they are A through H on your agenda. And I see our guest is still on there too, okay. And CAO, can you walk us through this one? CAO? You're muted.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm just trying to refresh my memory on which trees are which.
These are the ones that we spoke about the other day, Mr. Coben.
Yeah, no, I know where the property is, and you know the trees are numbered, and there's different recommendations in respect of each. And there was previously some confusion with respect to the numbering, so I just want to try to be sure about what I'm speaking about. From the looks of it, we have basically a bunch of Douglas fir trees that are all in really bad shape. They've all been previously topped. They're very unhealthy. They have big fat leaders, some of them. Some of them have tandem trunks or tandem tops, and they're not in good health. They're not going to be made to be in better health by topping them again. But that is the recommendation that is before you in respect of most of these trees, other than tree number 13, which is to be removed completely, which is one of the ones that has two tops growing out of it from about 2/3 of the way up. Tree 17 is, I believe, the cedar, which is the only tree that's really in good health, hasn't previously been topped. And so the recommendation is just to limb that one up. And so the trees that are in front of, I think number 13 is between the cedar and number 1, Brunswick Beach, which is the Malogny property. Her tree is growing out of the center of her deck, and she sort of separately indicated that she would be looking after topping or thinning that tree and looking after it. So the one next to that, between the cedar and her tree, I think is number 13 to be removed. Going south from there,
Number 17.
No, 17 is the healthy one. That's the cedar, just to be limbed up and left alone. The number 14 is suggested to be topped at least 1 meter above the original cut line and remove any dead limbs. 14 was one that is indicated with dangerous new tops developed after topping years ago, retopping. So the trees that would be in front of Golly Massaw's property at number 5, I think are 12 and 19. And they're not in great shape either. There's 2 top trunks developing on number 13. Oh, sorry, that's 13 again. So I did have a back and forth with the arborist on this matter because the owner of the property was required by us to obtain a report from a geohazard report with respect to sea level rise, and he did so. it was clear that, to me, that it won't be long before the root systems of these trees are going to be regularly under salt water. I asked the arborist what that would do to the trees. He said that will kill them. So how long it takes for us to get there, not quite sure. Probably 20 years or less. If you were to cut and remove those trees and leave the trunk systems, it would take 20 years for them to rot out. So they would provide the whatever erosion the system currently provides to the low bank. You know, you basically walk right onto the beach from this property. People will sit on logs underneath these trees, and the dangerous leaders that they possess will remain a risk to the municipality if they fall on somebody. So my recommendation or suggestion was that they be cut and removed, other than the cedar and the tree growing out of Ms. Malogny's deck. However, that's not the recommendation that you have before you. I think that I've probably said everything I need to say, and leave it to you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion from councillors?
Yeah,
Okay, Councillor Abbott, go.
I won't go on about some of the nesting season, except I've made a policy to vote against any tree permit that's going to happen in that time. But the tree committee, their function, and then the fact that inevitably staff will go down and take their own opinion and come up with a different solution. I just struggle with this. Go back to the tree committee, challenge them on the assumption, ask them why they wanted to do it that way. But not to follow their recommendations. I think it's disingenuous. They're out there, they're doing a job for us. We should either follow their recommendations, or we should go back and challenge them. Not just change them. Or give a different permit. This is, again, we're going to award something that's not what the tree committee recommended, based on something we decided sitting here. Last time we did it sitting around the table, this time we're doing it all in our own lounges remotely. I haven't been down there. I think we should, I just feel we should follow the tree committee recommendations. And if we think they're wrong, we should tell them that and see if things change that way, rather than just sit as a council and agree with staff recommendation that's different.
Are you putting this forward as you're the first on the recommendation, or are you suggesting we go back to them with the CAO's suggestion of item 19 and 12 being wiped out?
I think as a minimum you should go back to them with the changes that staff are recommending.
They received the information before we did, so they were aware of it.
So if I can just backtrack just a little bit here, my purpose in saying what I said was because the information is not laid out before you in a report, which takes into consideration all of the things that they were looking at. There's no explanation as to why they've come to their conclusions. I mean, these I'm not blaming them for that. It's something that the mayor and I have spoken to the chair of the tree committee about in terms of amending processes. I have not been able to get to a stage where I'm assisting them in a way that helps them provide reports that address the issues in a way that the public can see on an agenda in a report what it is and what considerations they've taken into account, who said what at the meeting, all those kinds of things. So I'm not blaming them for it. I simply wanted to make sure that council was aware that there was some additional information that came to light. It was provided to the tree committee. They looked at it. They determined that what you see before you was how they felt about it. and so that's the recommendation. I'm not suggesting that you do anything such as go back to them with respect to it, because they've already considered my information. I just wanted to make sure the council was aware that there was additional information and that you could, I don't know the extent to which you read the whole file. So I just wanted to bring it up. The recommendation is what it is, and I leave you to it.
Thank you very much, CAO.
Okay, sorry, then I need a bit of clarity. Now I'm really confused. I did read the whole file and it seems like it's duplicated and got a little bit, seems like I was reading it twice. Are we voting on what the tree committee recommended or what the CAO adjusted it to? What is the recommendation? And another question is, there have been residents that raised concerns about these trees coming down, not immediately affected neighbours. They've written in this correspondence to that effect. Were their concerns and correspondence taken into account as well?
Where we are is that we did the overview on this, and I made reference to this. We did not go first and second, so we're at a discussion before we come to the decision here. But we'll quickly go through that just as a technicality. I've read the preamble, and it's with the following provisions as you see in your agenda, A to H. I will put that forward. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll take that as a yes, thank you. So now we're back into the discussion on this one. So the recommendation from the tree committee is as stated.
So I think Councillor Abbott had asked whether or not the additional information from other residents had been considered, and I believe, Mayor McLaughlin, that it was considered. There was a piece that was provided by
Ms. Van Kroesik.
Van Kroesik, and I think that that was forwarded to the tree committee the night before, when it was received, and I'll let you address that.
Thank you very much, CEO. Yes, everybody had the benefit of the extensive package, the on-site and the previous day communication, as well as the ownership being on-site. I have nothing further to add. Any questions? There being none, I will call the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay, please. I love silence, but not this kind.
Nay.
Aye.
A little quiet. Thank you. I see hands. We're good. There are no nays. Sorry, nay. I'm tired.
Actually, there was one nay. You guys are a little quiet.
There's
Sounded like nay.
There's one nay, not a nay in the room. Sorry. Definitely too tired. Okay, thank you very much. We go on to item E, which is the Surrey.
Your Honor.
Yeah, there we go.
Councillor Abbott is opposed.
Yeah, we got that. I got
Opposed.
Sorry,
Yes, I recorded that.
Okay.
Who was opposed?
Councillor Abbott.
Councillor Abbott was opposed. Okay. Thank you. Item E, which is the emergency services, which is on page 441. And CAO, not much to say about this, but you can if you like.
Sorry, where are we?
This is the Surrey Regional Fire, and this is on page 441.
Yeah, no, I don't have any. I don't have anything further. I don't have any further information. I received the report, so thought I'd throw it on the agenda.
Thank you very much. I'll put forward the motion that the report be received. Can I have a seconder? A hand, please. Thank you. We'll presume all are in favor. Thank you. Before we move on to resolutions, it is 10 o'clock. Can I have a motion to extend the meeting for an hour, please? Thank you. Second, good. We're done. We're until 11, Carla. Thank you. Resolutions, I believe there are none. Bylaws, number 10. Excuse me. So the first one is that the 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw number 574-2020, which you can find on page 445, is that the 2020-2024 5-year financial plan bylaw number 574-2020 be adopted. I'll put forward that motion. Have a seconder, please. Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? There being none, I will call the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay, please.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All unanimous. Next item up is the tax rates bylaw number 578-2020, which you'll find on page 451. And the recommendation is that tax rates bylaw number 578-2020 be adopted. I'll put forward that motion. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. I have one. And any discussion? There being none, I'll call the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Nays opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we'll take that as unanimous. And we will go to correspondence. There's two sections to this. So this is on page 455, which is the items there. And Councillor Barmier, you are the king of correspondence this quarter, and off you go. Wings for it. You're on mute, Councillor Barmier?
No, you can sit.
I think I'm not prepared, so I'm gonna have to wing it a little on this, on the correspondence. Unfortunately, I didn't realize it was my turn. Oh, brother, okay. The first is Patrick Wheeler. I think it might be for information at this point about.
Can I suggest we receive this?
Yeah, let's call it received.
Thank you. Next one is the ECOM. Which is your annual general meeting's been postponed. I suggest we receive this.
Received District of Lake Country, interest on deferred payments. I'm guessing that's for information. We can call that received.
Thank you.
Metro Van, cancellation of council's meeting, page 22.
Received.
Okay, that's good information. Tracy Saxby, Myceta Sky, wood fibering LNG request to extend EA certificate, page 24.
The wood fibre project has looked to extend its environmental permit because the project's delayed, and there was a call to action on it.
Okay.
As in, would the Lions Bay prepared to support her in her action to, yes, fight against or oppose the extension of the permit?
Okay, so let's take that away and think about it. City of North Vancouver re-property tax deferment.
Sorry, Councillor Barmeyer, I think that the Saxby letter requires a response by May 19th. So might have to figure out what you want to do with that one.
Yeah, I'm suggesting I take that away.
Okay, we'll leave this with you to advise us at the next meeting, Councillor Barmier.
City of North Vancouver property tax deferment. I don't know, Peter, if there's an action there, but I suspect that's just for us to know what they're doing.
I concur, received.
Okay. Back to here. So now we're at resident correspondence. Jim Cave, re-update on the state of 90 Seaview Place. So that was, guess some concern around trees growing on the property. I guess, do we do anything in regards? Is that a friendly neighbor bylaw issue, or is it something we just how do we deal with that?
It's been a combination of demand letters based on fire hazard and on good neighbor bylaw. We've had very limited response from Mr. Tullian, who's an absentee owner, has basically let the property fall into repair. So my suggestion would be that I discuss the matter further again with the fire chief, talk about our options, and move the matter forward in a way that hopefully produces a cooperative response.
So we'll leave that with you, CAO.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Penny Nelson was wondering about sort of, I guess, a long overdue evacuation plan. Her email suggests this has been 11 years that she's requested it, so I wonder if we have any updates or something we can share.
Yeah, it's not correct that we've never updated the evacuation plan. We did that in, I think it was 2015. And so there is a VoLB emergency evacuation plan. It was appended and adopted as part of the emergency plan. It definitely needs an update and additional fleshing out of issues related to evacuation matters, but it's not quite correct to say that nothing has been done since 2009. But that being said, I know that our Deputy Emergency Program Coordinator has had some conversations with providers of evacuation plans, just to get some ideas. That was sort of in advance of the expected application on the evacuation plan funding that was available through UBCM, a grant up to $25,000, I think it was. That grant has been parked for the time being due to the emergency situation. And I'm not sure when they're going to come back to it, but there are potentially some additional steps that can be taken. I'm not sure what additional steps have been taken, if any, by the task force group that Councillor Bain convened a few months ago. But there are certainly some steps that we need to come back to and to examine the topic to determine where we're at and what we can do in the short term.
Okay, Pauline Brider expressing concern over the drop bus route.
I would highlight this as a good example of what I've done. This is, I've introduced this individual to the MP and the MLA. And if you're looking for a template for how to respond to a resident, this would be it. So I would call this one received.
Okay. Emily Montgomery, Re the Playgrounds. Now, I'm actually not familiar, but looking to have them opened, or?
She's provided the coastal health piece, which was very confusing and
oh yeah, no, I
contradicted.
I think on that piece.
I would suggest, Councillor Barmayor, we hold this until after our closed session, and depending on where that goes, I'll respond, if that's fine.
Elsie Roberts, Senior, on the 262 bus service cancellation, is a similar response, Ron, or are you?
I'll do that one as well. This is a non-resident to the village, but I will respond.
Hassan Monfared, I think he supported this voices opinion through email, and
he was, and I have responded. I will respond to him. Thank you, and I will also respond to Mandy Clark too.
I will be better prepared next time, Mark.
It's all good. It all comes back. Don't worry about it. Carla, you've got there's a B section to this.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Just let me share the screen.
Get your first. You're not finished yet, Norm.
Am I missing something?
I think Carla's got some stuff
You talking about the on-table correspondence?
Yes, there it is.
This is all, okay, this is all in the last few days, right? So Rose Dudley expressing her concern against the tower. Nathan Davidovich, I actually didn't read his email. Did you guys get through that one?
He was suggesting we partner with Squamish and try and get a bus.
Right. And $1,000 a day, is that even an option for us?
I'm not sure Squamish is interested, or Whistler particularly. I mean, they have their own transit system.
I don't have the rest of the on table, is that?
I'm sharing it on the screen.
It should be on your screen.
Can you see
Yeah,
it?
so I see this, so the next one, I guess we'll go to the next one.
Oh, okay, sorry. There we go.
And I tell you,
Present today, let's say in vain, so that's in the meeting.
I tell you what, why don't, if these are, without looking at the master, if there's anything cell tower related, I'll respond to them. How's that?
Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
Okay, and Mr. Henshaw, I'll take care of him too. I think he's going in the wrong direction, but we'll get him with the MP and MLA as well. Okay, Carla, next up. And that is...
in support of the cell tower. So this email is in support of the cell tower.
Okay. Okay, that's the search and rescue, that's fine.
We've got,
Carl.
Where's this from? Carl also in support.
Okay, they're all large, I'll take care of all of those then. And this is more Mayor Broughton, so I think to clean the decks, I'll take care of all of these ones then.
Okay.
Thank you. That closes correspondence. And snip back to the agenda again. Thank you, Councillor Barmere. And there was no new business. And
Oh, sorry, Mayor McLaughlin, we did have still the public questions and comments that relate to the rest of the meeting as opposed to just the cell tower matter.
Yes.
So I think we still have, looks like we still have Mrs. Massa. I'll just unmute her. And Polly, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, did you want to say anything at this juncture of the meeting? We have public questions and comments. You can talk about for 2 minutes any topic that was discussed in this meeting.
Well, I go back to the trees in front of the 3 properties in question, number 1, number 3, number 5, Brunswick Beach Road, which I still think trimming and topping is not the best option. So I leave it at that.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Masson. All right, then we are down to the closed portion of the meeting. And the proposed topics for discussion in the absence of public are utility rates in respect of a particular property, negotiations in respect of a proposed service. The subsection of that the council considers negotiations and related preliminary discussions respecting the provision of a proposed service may harm the interests of the municipality of the public. And the third item, confidential extra-jurisdictional information. D, legal advice, and E, 35 Kelvin Grove Way. I'll put forward those as a motion for topics for discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there are no nays, so the reasons that we will be going into public will be as that the meeting be closed to public on the basis of matters to be considered under the following sections of the community charter: 91 I, K, and N, and 92B. Council does not anticipate reconvening the open meeting for any purpose other than to adjourn the meeting generally and report out if applicable. All right, Carla, we will close and go into open. Sorry, try it in reverse. Okay. Are we ready? So here we are. Okay, we're back into the open meeting. Carla, are we good? Thank you very much. Time now is 20 after 11. Council reports out on the following 2 items. That the mayor is to write to the owner of a particular property with respect to not relaxing their utility rates. And 2, that the Public Works Mutual Aid Agreement between the Village of Lions Bay and the District of West Vancouver, dated for reference April 27th, 2020, the agreement be approved. Item number 2, that the service covered in the agreement may be provided in an area outside the municipality in accordance with Section 13 of the Community Charter, and that consent be given to West Vancouver to provide the service covered in the agreement with the Village of Lions Bay. And 3, that the mayor and the corporate officer be authorized to execute the agreement. And that is all that will be reported out. Can I have a motion to close the meeting? Seconder, thank you, and we are done. And